Boom! Howdy, fam. Anthony Johnson here today, co-founder of the Redman Group, founder of 21 Studios, 21 Convention, 22 Convention, 21 University, 10,000 other things online. Appreciate your patience today. Had some technical difficulties with my camera, microphones, typical stuff like that. But anyway, here today again with another episode of the Redman Group, a special edition with special guest, author, physicist, and philosopher David Harriman. He's the author of The Logical Leap, Induction in Physics, with an introduction by Leonard Peikoff, another philosopher that I'm a huge fan of. I found this book many years ago, I think like 2014, 2015. I was very impressed with it at the time and remain a fan of David's to this day. Anyway, without further ado, let me bring David on the show and he can further introduce himself and the work that he's done. Oh yeah, I'm out of this camera today. Duh. Anyway, David, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So for my fans who don't know you, can you tell me a little bit more about yourself and the work that you've done?
I'm here.
Yep.
Sure. I've had basically three careers. I started out working for a think tank that did studies for the Air Force. And my job was to make some of our most powerful weapon systems a little more accurate. And for a while, about a decade, I was very interested in that job, and it was rewarding. I got to work on the stealth bomber and the MX missile system, and you know, get a lot of talks around the country on improving the accuracy of those systems. And then at a certain point, I realized that it's not, you know, the culture was in trouble. The United States was in trouble and saved by those weapon systems. And I had a deeper interest in philosophy because I thought that's what the action was, basically. This country was going downhill because of basic ideas, not because our weapon systems weren't good enough. So, you know, I transferred out of that career and went to philosophy. And major interest in philosophy was how to think. My judgment, people don't really think very well. And there's a lot of what government tells them. They can't reach true independent evaluations on their own. People are really not very well educated today, and they don't know how to process the knowledge they have in order to come to more general conclusions. So that was my second career, you know, how to arrive at generalizations based on the facts that you know. I mean, we're bombarded by hundreds of different facts all the time. How do you put it together and really come to general conclusions that are true and important? And I wrote some papers on that, and then I wrote The Logical Leap, the book that you just mentioned, which is how scientists make discoveries. I mean, you know, if you think about what scientists do, I mean, they're observing thousands of different things and they get results in their labs and so on, but somehow they arrive at these incredibly broad theories: the atomic theory of matter, Newton's theory of motion, electromagnetic theories. And how do they get there? And philosophers have been terrible at answering that question. In general, most philosophers have been very skeptical that we can really know reality. So their answer is, well, scientists don't really get there. They make up stories, and then a general consensus of scientists believe the stories, and that's what we call truth. I heard a lot of that when I was in school in physics, and I always BS. And so Maybe I should write a book about it. Calling it out. Calling out. Yeah.
Even the closing line of the back cover, which may have been even developed by, I mean, maybe an influence on that. Maybe the book company did, the publishing company, but even the closing line, I remember this very vividly when I first found it, that science is number one. Philosophy, number one, is science. Number two, though, philosophy is a science that teaches scientists how to be scientific. I'm not sure if that was you or Rand,
Right.
but I remember this came to mind with your book, and that hit me really hard because we're taught growing up that philosophy is not science.
Yeah.
That science is only physical sciences, and everything else is beneath that. Like you're supposed to be, you're some peasant because you study philosophy instead of physics or something.
Well, I mean, that's an outcome of the attitude I was describing, that reality is really unknowable, and particularly broad abstractions. We can't get there from the facts. And that's what I was fighting in this book. And it doesn't just apply to physics. It applies to the fundamental ideas of philosophy. And I regard philosophy as just as much of a science as physics is.
And that separates you, though, from
not,
most philosophers today by a mile, right?
Oh, yeah. And it separates me, unfortunately, from, I mean, not only professors. I mean, professors would go crazy if I said that. But unfortunately, the thrust of my career has not been to talk to professors. I got enough of that in school. I know how hopeless those people are. I wanted to reach, intelligent, educated people. I mean, general populace. And what's unfortunate right now is that attitude toward philosophy has seeped in through the general populace, and as soon as you say philosophy, they think, oh, this is just a matter of opinion, and how could this be anything real? When I opened one of my lectures one time by saying, when I tell people that I'm a philosopher of science, their reaction is, well, that's like saying that you study the migratory flights of pigs, or philosophy and science just don't go together. The mating habit of rocks. They assume that those two things are completely incompatible, when in fact science is based on philosophy. The kind of questions that scientists have to answer is, what is knowledge? How do we prove it? And what kind of evidence should we accept? What does it even mean to say something is possible or probable, or that we
plausible?
Or arbitrary. Like, this is just silly nonsense that we should ignore. All of those come down to epistemological issues, where philosophers who are supposed to study knowledge should be giving guidance on those issues. And they've defaulted on that task. And
would you say scientists today are lost without philosophy? Because that's what it seems like when they give you these platitudes. The science is settled and all this garbage. They try to bully the average person around with their degrees and stuff.
Well, certainly government science is, a lot of it is nonsense. And there are various reasons for that. One reason is that the government wants the scientists to arrive at certain conclusions. If you arrive get your funding. If you don't arrive at their government-approved conclusions, your funding is cut off. So they control science in that way. I mean, they do it with global warming. They do it with this China virus. So science is supposed to be the pursuit of truth.
Yep.
But when it becomes government funded, it loses that fundamental of just being also.
David, your internet connection's a little bit.
A lot of non-objectivity.
I picked back up. Never mind.
Oh,
there's actually there's a camera button if you see stop. Let's try something else here. Yeah, it's coming in and out, but there's a stop camera button on your screen. If you click that, I think it'll improve your audio a lot. It'll cut your video out, but your audio should go through the roof. Do you see it on your screen?
A stop camera button?
Yeah, it's a stop cam. It's on the screen. If not, we can keep going this way, but it'll improve your audio, I think, a lot. David, can you hear me? Oh, shit. I'll see if we can get him back. There we go. Oh. David, you there? Yep.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, don't worry about it. We'll just keep going this way. I was going to see if it would improve your audio by cutting the video out, but it'll work. Yeah, people are welcoming you back.
Okay.
Anyway,
yeah,
we can move on to some more
about how. Yeah,
I did want to ask a little bit more about induction, actually. So the average person is seeing a lot of like Sherlock Holmes, and they hear about deductive logic a little bit, but induction is something that they're not familiar with, and you've described it, I think, a little bit throughout the show. But for the average person watching, what is the difference between inductive logic and deductive logic?
Oh, okay. Well, deduction is simply taking generalizations, general truths that you know, and applying them to specific instances. So if you know that all men are mortal and Socrates is a man, then Socrates is mortal. But you have to start out with that generalization, all men are mortal. Okay. Induction is a way of viewing the particular facts around you and arriving at those broad generalizations. Now, my book focused on induction, and I think, and that was my interest, because I really think, for the most part, deduction is easy. And thinking mistakes that people make are 99% inductive. Occasionally, you find somebody just making a deductive fallacy, but you know, I mean, pigs are mortal. Socrates is mortal, therefore Socrates is a pig. Yeah, I mean, that's a deductive fallacy, but the people don't really make that mistake very often. The real mistakes are always arriving at the inductive generalizations. And So in regard to teaching people how to think, that's where the action, and that's what I wanted to write about.
Most philosophers
So
too are
that's what my
largely
book focuses on.
Most philosophers too are dismissive of inductive logic, right? And scientists, they don't regard this as a serious way to arrive at truth. Am I understanding that right? And that's why your work was, Ayn Rand was number one, I think, disagreed with that. And your work was an advancement on that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they're I mean, you can, I guess you can look at it two ways. Philosophers are very, very skeptical about the validity of inductive logic.
Yeah.
Now, the average person out there on the street uses generalizations all the time, and you couldn't live without using them. I mean, people don't walk off cliffs. I mean, they know, hey, if I'll fall down and, you know, die. That's a generalization. I mean, no doubt about that. So philosophy professors, in a certain way, are in a class by themselves. I mean, these people couldn't survive out at a university.
Well put.
People use inductive generalizations all the time. The problem is they don't have a clear understanding of how they arrive at those. And further up you get in abstraction, the more difficulty they have. And the more difficulty they have defending their inductive generalizations, if anybody calls them on it. So I want to explain more explicitly how that process works, and in what cases and how you can say, yeah, I know this, and here's how I know it. Give people those weapons.
Yeah.
Teach them how to think, and teach them not to back from what they really do know.
Yep.
And that's really important now that government is coming out and telling us to believe things absolutely. And people shrug their shoulders and say, oh, I don't know if government says it, I guess I should obey. So
it is really amazing today,
you know,
how
people need.
I was saying it's amazing like how unthinking the masses have become, or at least we're seeing that over the past 18 months. Like you maybe suspected this before 18 months ago, but you didn't really see it. And all of a sudden you have all these edicts, these mindless edicts that so many people are obeying. There's pushback too that's getting pretty fierce, which I like to see. But
yeah, there's some
the fact
pushback.
that it's gotten so bad, it's really alarming, you know?
I would like to see a lot more pushback.
Me too.
I was driving by a high school the other day when it was out, and I was seeing, 50, 60 kids pouring out of this high school. Okay, these are 16, 17 kids that are in no danger at all from China. They're outside, walking on a sidewalk, and they're all wearing their masks. They're like zombies. I mean, this is what they've been taught. They haven't investigated on their own. They're probably not capable of it. And I mean, I just don't blame them that much, because I know what they taught in school, but it's a horrifying sight to me to see the kids who don't have COVID, are in no danger from COVID, can't get COVID else, walking around outside with their masks.
The parents and teachers too are complicit in this.
It's Oh, definitely. But, and I mean, there's studies done, a Stanford study that show that these kids much more by the masks than could possibly benefit anyone. Your mouth is the biggest part of the body. Okay, so you're holding all that stuff in and breathing it over and over, wearing that mask. How is that helping the kid? It's no, it's getting vaccines. I have a 5-year-old boy. He was watching KPBS, okay, Elmo is coming, shouting at these 5-year-old kids that they have to get a vaccine and they have to wear their masks. Okay, you're kidding me, right? We're taking medical advice, and it's absurd medical advice that goes against all the facts.
Yeah.
I want people to wake up.
Yep. I think something that
I have to mention something else. Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. It's a minor irritating thing that happened to me lately. I went to Las Vegas for a little getaway vacation. Okay. The Raiders football team has moved to Vegas now. I don't know that you heard about that. But so it's the Las Vegas Raiders now. Well, Nevada has mask mandates, and now they've passed vaccine mandates to get into Raiders football games. Okay, so I don't know whether you have heard about the reputation of Raider fans. They're supposed to be this big, tough, rowdy group. Okay, so the image in my head is all these guys coming to the game with their pickup trucks and their Harleys, big, burly guys with tattoos. Instead of ribs and drinking beer and so on before the game, instead now they're going to get a line and chant, "I'm going to be a good boy. I'm going to get vaccine." And they won't be allowed into the game unless they get. Everybody's just going to go along with it. The team, the ladies, rather than the Raiders.
Sorry, your audio was cutting in and out there.
Okay,
Sorry
you were going somewhere else.
Yeah, it's all right. We can move on to some more complex topics, actually.
Okay.
So you're talking to me about the vaccine mandates you're seeing in Vegas. Obviously, there's a going on around the world. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Right. Yes.
So
yeah, the vaccine mandates.
Yeah. So I have an issue with that on like 10 different levels. Like a lot of Americans, like a lot of sane people left on this planet. But I actually get a really bad vibe about them. I've never been an anti-vaxxer per se. I've had some in my childhood. I'm not like super against them or for them. I'm skeptical of something like that as I would anything else. And if I wanted one, I would investigate it on an individual basis. But this COVID one, all of them, all these therapies, these gene therapies they're alleging are vaccines, it's dubious on so many levels. And there's so much force behind it. There's so much aggression and hostility. I've never seen anything like it in my life. There's never anything like this for any kind of flu, including H1N1 back in 2009, all that stuff. And I get a very bad vibe from it on a almost like a communist or, Alex Jones, let's say, type scale. Like, I don't know. I've never seen this much aggression and force behind a vaccine to the point that they want to, force these vaccines in my body, in my blood for everyone, little children, adults, all this
Right.
stuff. So what are your thoughts on like who's really behind this
Right.
stuff? Because it seems organized, like just to be very blunt about it.
Yes, I agree. First of all, the idea of a government mandate for these vaccines is a violation of everybody's rights. And people should understand something about China. The recovery rate from it is 99.5%, at least. And pretty much the only people that are dying from it are people over the age of 60 with pre-existing conditions. Who is a horrible violation of people's rights. My picture cut out. Are you there?
Now? Yeah, can you hear me?
Anyway, so that, okay, yes. So that's one thing. I mean, the idea of, for instance, even calling this a pandemic is ridiculous. The recovery rate is way too high. Old people with pre-existing conditions are the only ones in danger, really. But the government has no business getting into this. Secondly, it should make people very suspicious that there are a couple of methods out there that were pretty effective before these experimental vaccines. Hydroxychloroquine, and there's another one. And the media attacked those methods and Trump for even suggesting that they should be used. And now it's been proven scientifically that they're pretty effective. So the government. So, I mean, those are among the questions that people should be asking themselves. It's time to stop obeying.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to think about. I think I can explain why, but I think, first of all, this China virus did come from the Wuhan lab that helped them make it, and deliberately.
Yeah.
It was released deliberately the election year in order to get Trump out of office.
Yep.
If you want me to elaborate on that, I will.
Well, first of all, I agree. I think that I don't know that with 100% certainty, but I think there's a very, very high likelihood that that's what happened. Like, that's what I believe. And, I wasn't there when they did it. I don't have magic powers to see what, with 100% certainty, but that's what I believe happened. And I think it makes a lot of sense. The Chinese hated Trump, and it was a really good method for them to help facilitate that happening.
I lost you again.
Oh, can you hear me? Check. Hello? Can you hear me? Check. Audio. Check. Can you hear me? It's your internet connection that's, which there isn't much we can do about, unfortunately. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Can you hear me? Oh, he's out. One moment, folks. Let's see if we can get him back. In the meantime, you get to stare at my pretty face and my hat. Congratulations. Actually, let's talk about his book while we're seeing if he gets back on the show in a second. His book is really, really good. It's pretty meaty, several hundred pages. Oh, upside down. It's a book that'll help you understand, like we're talking about here, number one, philosophy, science, logic. Oh, he's gone. Let's see if he comes back in a second, or if he calls. See what we can do about it. Nope, he's back. There he is. Hey, David.
All right. Yeah, I'm here.
Yep. Can you hear me? Cool.
Yeah.
So we were talking about the vaccines and the mandates and stuff. Number one, I like what you said, that it's time to stop obeying. I mean, whatever the situation is, whatever the motivations are for these mandates, that's the bottom line. Our rights are at stake. People need to stop obeying everywhere. In Florida and America, throughout the world. Australia seems to have it really bad, which is, I guess, kind of ironic and also really sad. I mean, I think they started out as a prison colony. I don't know if you've been watching what's happening in Australia, but it's getting really bad. There's now people are protesting, thank God, but they have like vaccine passports now between the states in Australia. They have, I think, 6 or 7 states.
Right.
Mandatory vaccinations. There was a father the other day who got arrested when he tried to stop them from injecting his daughter with the vaccine. It was this huge commotion, and it was really disturbing to watch. A father who didn't want his daughter to be vaccinated, they just arrested him, took him down.
I didn't see that, but that's horrible. I mean, one of the things that I think Americans need to know is the bigger world picture, because there are protests in Italy, in Spain, France, England. I mean, this isn't just the United States. People are starting to stand up and say, hey, enough of this government power just shoving things down our throats. We don't want it. And I think I'm really happy to see those countries have protests and people starting to stand up. I still believe that the future of the world lies in the hands of the United States. If the United States goes down this road toward totalitarianism, the rest of the world is not going to be saved without the United States. I really think everything depends on this country. And
I agree.
People need to see, Americans need to stand up.
Yeah. That's what's, there's, I think, multiple motivations maybe for the mandates. People talk about money. These companies they're all in bed with the government. They want the government to force people to take the vaccines, all the boosters, these stupid booster shots now and stuff. I do think there's some of that, but I don't think that is the entire picture, not even close. That would seem, the money motivation seems like a minor factor for the mandates and the level of aggression and forcefulness behind it, which isn't, I don't think, explainable by simple money. Coca-Cola and Disney are companies. I don't see them trying to forcefully inject me with their some Disney vaccine. So it's like,
Yeah, no, I actually don't think that primarily this is about money. I mean, it's a secondary motivation in some cases. And certainly politicians can be bought off pretty easily by these multi-billionaires. But if you start asking yourself, well, I mean, people that are really pushing these masks, these mandates, what people like Bill Gates, George Soros, Zuckerberg, Bezos. Okay, these guys already have $100 billion. They have more money than they could possibly spend in their lives if they tried, every day for the rest of their lives to spend as much money as they could think of on totally frivolous things. They still couldn't spend all their money. And they're pushing really hard for this increased government power. So obviously, it's not about money. I think it's about power.
Yeah.
And what's the best way to get power over a society? Make the people afraid. Mm-hmm. Fear makes them think that, well, we need protection. And who's going to protect us except the government? Yeah. So they don't know their rights to the because there's and they don't know any better. So
it's almost like fear
a lot
emotionally.
Of the people, I think, that are behind this.
I was going to say, it's almost like fear emotionally and cognitively cripples people. Like even if their ability to think critically is not great in the first place, it makes it even 10 times worse. It locks everything up, and it makes them obedient, essentially.
Right. Absolutely. In fact, my favorite philosopher, Ayn Rand, once said, "Fear is the mind killer." And
yes,
I think that's true. And I actually think that the people that are pushing to increase the power of government right now, they understand that. The more they can make people afraid, the more those people are going to be willing to relinquish their rights and hand it over to the government. So,
and then you end up with nothing. Yeah, you end up with you end up broke, poor, third world country, no rights, no freedom, no future. Yeah, it's sick. And then you have the depopulation stuff. All these guys, like Bill Gates is an open fan of depopulating the planet, which is really alarming. Like, yeah. Can you talk to me a little bit about climate change and overpopulation? I call these conspiracy theories. Overpopulation, climate change, global warming. They like to lob conspiracy theory to anybody who's skeptical of something, but these are fantastical ideas that they have like no proof of, and they claim Alexandria AOC Cortez, that lady, right? She says the world's end in 12 years. 12 years. And she's an elected official, for federal Congress of the United States. This is crazy talk, and these people believe this crap.
Yeah, that's not original. I mean, she's not an original thinker, obviously, but no, that goes back more than a century, certainly. I mean, everybody, every left-wing politician, economist has been saying, well, there's a zero-sum game. There's just so many resources on the table, and the more people we have, the poorer we're going to be, and the more horrible things are going to get. And every time things are wrong, and it's been going on for so many decades and generations now. There was an environmentalist professor at Berkeley, back in 1970. He made a list of all the resources we were going to run out of by the year 2000. And every single one of those resources, our reserves have increased. We have more now than we had in 1970.
Wow.
Now, why? Well, simple reason that people keep discovering new deposits of these resources. They keep discovering new ways to get them. They keep discovering better ways to use them. Knowledge increases, and that is not a finite resource. that is what the human brain does if it's left free to do it. We think that's how we survive, and all of the doomsday predictions of these leftists over the last century, not a single one of them has come true. In fact, in every case, they have not only been false, they've been spectacularly false. I mean, the exact opposite has happened. So,
everything you're saying now, it reminds me a lot too of what Rand used to say on Rand, that wealth is a product of man's mind, not like, materials, resources and stuff. It's a product of thinking. It's a product of knowledge. And all these liberals, these Marxists, these communists, they have obviously no understanding of that. They believe the opposite, that wealth comes out of the ground, which is bullshit. So yeah, I think that's where a lot of this stems from, is a rejection of Ayn Rand's idea that wealth is a product of the mind.
Well, one of the clearest, most obvious examples of that. Look at the Middle East. Okay, so a lot of their money comes from oil, right? Mm-hmm. Well, 150 years ago, oil was considered a nuisance. I mean, if you had oil seeping up, well, you had a bad piece of land. That's all. You should go look to farm someplace else, or because there was no use for oil. Now, when did oil actually become valuable? Invention of the internal combustion engine, invention of all of modern technology and factories and so on. All of a sudden, that made oil valuable. And it was not even a resource before that. So,
wow.
I mean, these people in the Middle East, I mean, because it's in the ground, that doesn't make it a resource. What makes it a resource is people thinking, inventing. That turns it into a resource. So, and of course, we're in a situation now where the United States is extremely rich in fossil fuels. And the only reason we would ever have to depend on the Middle East or anybody else is the government passes laws against us getting the fossil fuels that are on our own land.
Before we move off of climate change, President Barack Obama, when he was president, said that the science is settled on this, and he's not the first one to say that. Is there any meaningful science that backs up all these doomsday predictions? Like, I haven't seen any personally. Like, I'm not worried about Florida sinking into the ocean. I live here. Should I be worried about Florida sinking? Like,
well, I should start out by saying that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. So, if you look at the entire history of the world, even way before there were people around, there is some correlation between carbon dioxide levels and global temperatures. Okay, so if carbon dioxide levels were to go up a large amount, could we expect some increased warming? Yes. So I'm not a global warming denier.
You're not a science denier? You must be a science denier. I bet it's coming. You're science deniers. Yeah. That's what they call you now.
Yeah, well, they would. What I will say is this. well, first of all, it's worth keeping in mind that these people, for political reasons, have been caught lying about global warming. I mean, they've actually exchanged emails saying, how can we manipulate this data to make the warming look larger than it is? I mean, that controversy already came out a couple of decades ago. That should have been a really, really big story. I mean, people should have paid attention to that. Like, oh, they've got an agenda here. They're lying to us because, again, it's like the vaccine case. They want you to be afraid so they can control you. Now, let's take seriously the claim that the carbon dioxide levels are rising a little too fast. There could be some danger in the future. People that are seriously, genuinely worried about that topic, what should they be doing? Well, in my judgment, they should be promoting nuclear power as hard as they can. Because here is a form of power that has a lot of the same virtues and advantages of fossil fuels and does not emit carbon dioxide. Okay, all this talk about solar panels and windmills, I mean, running the country on windmills is bizarre. Any scientist who isn't retarded will tell you that. I mean, I'm sorry, it's just not controversial. I mean, solar panels, windmills, biofuel. I mean, give me a break. All of that is nonsense. The one form of power that, other than fossil fuels, that is good is hydroelectric power. But that is completely location dependent. I mean, it's great in the state of Washington because they get an enormous amount of rain there. They have some mountainous countries, some big lake rivers. They can build these major hydroelectric power plants and dams. Okay, that's terrific. Tell the people in Kansas about that, or in Nebraska or Iowa. Oh, run your state on hydroelectric power. No, they can't do that. They need fossil fuels or nuclear power plants. So right now in the United States, we get, I don't know, about 80% of our power from fossil fuels. So if we shut down the fossil fuel industry, we immediately become a third world country. And Bill Gates' vision of depopulation happens really rapidly, with hundreds of millions of people dying. So that's what they're talking about. If you're against fossil, at this point, if you're against fossil fuels, you're against human life.
Yes. There's been a lot of objectivists too that have argued for that too. I forget the names of some of the people at ARI. Not that I'm a fan of the organization at this point, but there's some of the few people I've seen. There's some of the few people I've seen though argue that if you're against fossil fuels, you're against human life. And I agree completely.
One of them is Alex Epstein. Now he left ARI, but he wrote a short book called "The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels."
That's right.
And I would definitely recommend that book to people. Mm-hmm. It doesn't go into a huge amount of scientific detail, and if I'd written it, I might have included a chapter on nuclear power and its potential for the future. But for what that book does, it makes an excellent case that people should need to know about. It's fossil fuels. I mean, shutting down coal plants right now, I don't think people realize how that is going to impact their lives.
Yeah.
And people in Texas are starting to figure out, government put pressure on them to shut down their coal plants and replace them with windmills. And when this ice storm hit this last winter, there were people freezing to death in Texas.
Yeah.
We're going to see a lot more of that.
Yeah, you mentioned the depopulation thing with Bill Gates, and he's just one of many. Although I'm finding out recently that Elon Musk, I guess a competitor of his at that top tier billionaire level, actually has the opposite position. He thinks that the population could collapse, and I think he's right. We're facing, basically, he thinks the population collapse, whether it's for financial reasons with all the like Ponzi schemes like Social Security that are set up around the world. But he's right. The birth rate and stuff's way too low. And people like Bill Gates have it exactly backwards. They want to basically worsen the problem. We need more people. Like the world's a huge place. But something you mentioned stood out to me. You said rapidly, like this could happen rapidly. And that's why I titled the show today, Totalitarianism at Light Speed, which is a comment you made on Facebook about a week or two ago. Yeah. And that really stood out to me based on living in America for the past 18 months. It is unreal how fast this has all happened. And it makes me concerned about things like genocide and gulags, which were a feature of the 20th century, not an oddity. Like this was a real thing. And I don't think the average person really has wrapped their head around that.
No, I actually have to say, I didn't see this coming, a couple of years ago. I mean, not at this speed. I saw it coming, but not at this speed. Not government, politicians coming out and saying things like, well, we need to give up free speech for common good. So the government is going to work with social media to eliminate the voices of all these people who disagree with us. And can you imagine like a decade ago, the government just coming out and admitting that and getting away with it?
Unthinkable. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's there are some far left politicians who have even mentioned things like re-education camps for Trump supporters.
Nope.
In America? Are you kidding me? So this is, just a few years ago, this would have been inconceivable. And yet, this is the world we're living in right now. And so, my message to people is wake up and wake up fast, because 3 years from now, it's going to be too late. If you're going to do anything to save your country, you need to get on board now.
Yep.
And you need to stop taking orders. Oh, one of the, based on my Vegas trip, which I regret going on, one of the tips that small
your connection's having trouble again. Can you hear me? I can hear you a little bit of sound, but I can't hear anything. You there? Oh, you're back. I think it's good.
Are you back?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
You look like back. I lost you for a minute. No, I was just going to say, just as advice to people, that if they're going to take a vacation, don't take it in a state that has a mask mandate or a vaccine mandate. Don't spend your money in those states. That's just one small way of voting. And I would, I mean, I shouldn't have spent a dime in Vegas. All of Nevada survives on tourism money. The whole state would go bankrupt within a year if people just stop going. So that's what I hope happens to them.
Yeah, me too. Come to Florida, man. It's a great state. Our governor's been a real.
Yeah.
I voted for him in 2018, but he's vastly exceeded my expectations.
Oh yeah, no.
You froze again. You there?
Oh, okay.
You're back. It's your internet speed fluctuates over time. If your neighbors are using it and stuff, so that might be what's causing it. Check. Oh, lost video. Just me, fam. You get me for a few minutes. Lucky you. David, by the way, maybe a speaker this year at the 21 convention. There he is. He's back. I think you'll be good for a bit. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm looking forward to talking on at the conference. One of the topics. I don't know how much we've gotten into it so far, but the last part of my career has been education, and that's been one of the major failures in American society. It's power-hungry politicians. One of the first things they try to do is take over the education system, and that unfortunately happened early on in the 20th century in America. So the rise of public education and the decline of private education and the complete control of the government over education. So right now, the public education at K through 12, 85% is public education controlled by the government. So kids learn what the government wants them to learn, and they don't learn what the government doesn't want them to learn.
Yeah.
So
I've actually learned, you'll find this amusing, but in my senior year of high school, I took a class because I was in an advanced program called IB. It was like AP classes basically, but international baccalaureate. It was pretty difficult, some of it. But one of the classes was called Theory of Knowledge, TOK. That's what we called it as kids. But it was epistemology basically. But it was terrible. I hated it. It was like because it was all BS, relativist, subjectivist nonsense. Looking back on it, I didn't understand it at the time, but I had enough revulsion to it that it was very annoying to me. And I really think that I didn't start learning a lot about life, not only about life, but even just science and philosophy until I left high school, until I got into college. And I ran a couple years later, but even just reading on my own, just reading books out of the library and buying them off Amazon. I mean, high school in particular was so much just like, it was so much memorization and propaganda. And when I was younger, even in the 90s, I think when I was young, it was different. That rote memorization, that obedience wasn't quite there until I think the 2000s. It really picked up for some reason, at least in my county.
Yeah, I mean, I had a similar experience. The funny thing is that I ended up becoming a professional physicist. My physics class in high school was one of my least favorite classes, and I didn't do well in it.
Wow.
I mean, if you went back to my high school physics teacher and, you know, told him, oh, you know, this kid in your class, he ended up being a successful professional physicist, he would say, what? The kid was a worthless student. But it was because it was so boring. I mean, the way they taught physics, I mean, the way they teach something like Newton's laws. Oh, Newton had 3 laws. 1, 2, 3. Memorize these for the test. No idea where they came from, no context, no evidence. I mean, I remember when I taught a middle school course just a couple of years ago, and it was at just one unit at the very end of the class. I asked the kids, well, what did you enjoy and what did you hate about this whole year of science that you've just experienced? And when I mentioned Newton's laws, Newton's physics, there was like this universal groan from the class. It was like, oh my God, that was so boring. And, you know, in fact, that was the birth of modern science. And if it's taught right, it's incredibly exciting.
Well, he was a hero. I mean, he was a heroic figure. And I think your book actually is one of the first books I've seen that I got that attitude about him from you. Like he was like you're saying, like this is where science came from, basically, modern science.
Yeah, and actually, I would argue not only science. In some respects, it's where the United States came from, because the United States is the nation of the Enlightenment, and it was based on the power of reason and the right of every individual to think for themselves and pursue their own happiness. I mean, that was the essence of the United States. Well, that idea hadn't existed in history before Newton. And what Newton led to the Enlightenment, he set the basis, the groundwork for people thinking, wow, this is what the human mind is capable of. This is how well people can think, how well individuals can think and run their own lives. Shouldn't they be free to do so? I actually don't think that the United States would have come about. That's how important I think he was to Enlightenment and to history.
Wow.
So, you know, the idea that all the kids out there are groaning, you know, when you mention Newton, that is a failure of the education system.
You're basically saying we should revere him like a founding father, or in the same vein as a founding father.
At least so.
At least, wow.
Because,
Well put.
I mean, think about everything around you that supports the standard of living that we have today. I mean, all you have to do is look around the room, basically, wherever people are. There's metal tables, there's coffee makers, there's, I mean, whatever it is.
Well, David, you didn't build that, man. You didn't build that. That was built by the collective.
Yeah, no, I didn't build it, but people like Newton paved the way, you know, toward building it. And none of that was possible before Newton. And you know, I'm not sure that uneducated people today, in other words, people that went to public schools, have any appreciation for what life was like 300 years ago.
I mean, how old is toilet paper? 100 years ish? Like, even something like that people take for granted. Like,
Oh yeah,
never mind electricity, plumbing, like everything,
yeah.
cars, like.
Oh yeah. I mean, the bicycle is only 150 years old, much less the car. Forget about the car.
Yeah.
The we there was. I mean, if you think about the history of medicine, I mean,
Yeah.
there was nothing until the last 300 years. The if you got really, they put leeches on you to suck out the bad blood.
Yeah.
That's how far we've come.
Yep.
So yeah, a lot of that started with Newton, and people used to know that. Lavoisier, the founder of chemistry, gave Newton credit for his advances in chemistry. The founders of geology, of other sciences, they realized that, okay, all this basically started with Newton. We were taught how to do science by guys like and now, well, those are just a bunch of boring old white guys.
Yep.
So
Yep. Speaking of old white guys, let's talk a little bit about Trump. I think, like me, you were skeptical of Trump. I know I was in 2016. I was much more of a Rand Paul guy because I trusted his father.
Right.
After he dropped out, I was kind of disillusioned or disappointed. I decided to support Gary Johnson very reluctantly, simply because I hated the fake two-party system. I hated Democrats and I hated the Republican establishment too. And I didn't understand that Trump wasn't a part of that. Obviously, now we went through a full term of Trump. So what are your thoughts on Trump as an objectivist and as a philosopher and as a physicist? Like, you ended up supporting him, but a lot of your colleagues probably didn't.
Right. I mean, I have to admit that my initial reaction was something like yours. I was uncertain about him. And then when I saw how tough he was and that he took his patriotism seriously, he started growing on me. And then I got to the point where I now think he's one of the best presidents in the history of the United States. He was the right guy for the job at the right time. He was the only outside the establishment guy that was tough enough to step in and fight that DC swamp. And he knew how to do it. He had spent a business career dealing with people in the mob and so on. He knows how to talk to those kind of people, and he knows how to back them down. And he's a fighter. And he is a real patriot. And I actually think now that his America First movement is the last hope for this country. That
he's
peacefully, but if he doesn't, if that movement doesn't make a comeback and win within the next, I would say 3 years, I mean, before 2024, I'm very pessimistic about the future of this country. I mean, I don't know who the Democrats would run in 2024. They obviously, Biden is out. I mean, he's not even president now. He's just suffers from dementia.
It's like Weekend at Bernie's in there at the White House, the movie Weekend at Bernie's.
I know. I mean,
The dude's dead, man.
no, I mean, they write his scripts for him. They put little pieces of paper in his pocket, and when he's fumbling around, he's supposed to go to his pocket and grab out a piece of paper and try to complete the sentences. I mean, and then he stumbles, trying to read the script. He's not president of the United States. And actually, I heard a poll recently where 57% of the people in the U.S. don't really believe Biden is president. They don't think he's running the country. They think it's somebody else. They don't know who. And I certainly don't think it's Kamala Harris. So who's doing it? I leave your listeners to speculate about that. But and who they'll come up with for running in 2024, I don't know. But if that person wins, I don't think they would win honestly, but if they win by some means, I'm not very hopeful about the country, like I said.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I have the same beliefs. It's Trump or bust, basically. It's not just Trump. It's anybody around him with that level of seriousness. DeSantis, I think, is a viable alternative. But him and Trump get along great, and I'm not surprised.
Right, I agree. Trump or a close member of his group that he could help get into the White House. I mean, I think that, one of the reasons I said Trump was not because of the good qualities I see in him. Not only because of that, but because he has such strong support in the country. I think if any of the good people that could possibly get elected in 2024 will need Trump's support in order to get into the White House.
100%. I like the way you put it too. You said he took his patriotism seriously, and he was a Democrat for a lot of his life. But like someone in the chat that's watching the live stream here now, they mentioned that Democrats back in the 70s and 80s, like a long time ago, a lot of them were patriots. Whereas today, this radical liberal stuff wasn't quite there yet. It was a more genuine divide between the parties, and there was much less zombie-like behavior, I think, back then.
Right.
But regardless of what Trump's political parties were over his life, he really is a patriot and he loves America. And that is basically the bar has dropped that low because the situation is that serious. It's that dangerous. Like we're teetering on the edge of the fall of Rome, basically, as I see it.
Oh, yeah. No, I think Trump's enemies are people that hate this country. So, it's like you said, Trump or bust. That's and things have changed very rapidly. People that were called left wing 40 years ago would not be considered left wing today. I remember Reagan, I think when he was running against Mondale in 1984, they were accusing him of being this, ultra conservative, and he said, "Well, I would be happy to run on the Democratic platform of 1960." Give me that. I'd love to run on that, but that's how much things changed. It's
the one America First, that wing of politics. It's the last thing. It's the last organized political movement with balls left in this country, and love for America. It's that
Right.
simple. Like these
Right.
people do, like Biden. Biden is kind of a neoliberal, limousine liberal, they call him, but I don't think he has any love for America. He doesn't care. He's just a happy puppet to eat ice cream and walk around the White House. Like it's gotten
Well, I
that
mean,
bad.
look, I mean, he's just a bought and paid for politician. I don't think he's ever had any ideas that he had any commitment to. I mean,
Yeah.
if China's willing to pay for him, then that's okay. He'll do whatever China tells him to. The people behind Biden now that are running the country, I think they actually have goals, and they're very bad goals for the future of this country. I don't think Biden cares as long as he gets his money. And now I'm not even sure he cares about money because he couldn't count it.
Yeah.
he's that out of it.
So I have a question here. I was going to pull up Leonard's book. I have it somewhere. One of Leonard's books, The Ominous Parallels. I think his first book, actually.
Yeah.
I think Rand even penned the introduction to it. But my question is, Leonard wrote that book with parallels between like Nazi Germany, totalitarianism, and where America was heading, which is not what we're seeing, unfortunately. Like, holy shit.
Right.
But also there's parallels between America as a republic and even the West, not just America, but like the four: America, Canada, Britain, and Australia. Almost like the fall of the West compared to the fall of Rome, like the Roman civilization. So do you see? I'm as concerned as you about communism and totalitarianism and gulags, but I also see an even bigger picture with national debt. Like Don Watkins at ARI, one of our old speakers, wrote a book all about this and how America is about, at this point, 200 trillion in debt, not 30, which 30 is crazy.
Right.
But really, if you add all of it, it's like 190 something trillion dollars. So are you concerned about the fall of the West even beyond America and what we could face here?
Yes. And I mean, I'm not an economist, so I can't speak to the economic issues, but what I will speak to is the philosophic issues. And the United States is the last hope. Said, in terms of American politics, it was Trump or bust. I would say, in terms of wider world picture, it's United States or bust. England isn't going to save the world. Australia isn't going to save the world. We are the nation of enlightenment, and we're the only country in the history of the world that was founded on the principle of individual rights and freedom. So, and we're the strongest military power in the world. So if anybody's going to step up and save Western civilization, it has to be us.
Yeah.
And I hope that happens. Right now, we're not in good shape. Like you say, even financially, we're teetering on bankruptcy here. I mean, I think one of the things that Trump wanted to do was make the dollar much stronger through various means. Not continue spending trillions of dollars on and giving it to other countries that are our enemies and flushing it down the toilet in 1,000 different ways. He was trying to put the U.S. dollar back on more solid ground, which has to happen.
Yeah. Trump even had a great idea that I had never seen anyone. I was going to say, Trump had a great idea in 2018, even when he was president, and he unfortunately wasn't able to do it in time before he left. But he had the idea of basically selling off American assets that the federal government owns which are actually huge. That's one thing I've researched this myself. America has like $150 trillion in assets, minerals and, land and all kinds of stuff around the world. Now you have to find a buyer for it, but basically you could sell off like a chunk of these to pay off a huge amount of debt. And that was Trump's idea. I'm sure he wasn't the first person to think about it. People who research this stuff more in depth already know that, but it was a surprise to me that America has so many assets worth over $100 trillion. And you could use that to pay off at least some of the short-term debt, the 30 trillion that we're at now.
Yeah.
And so, if he gets back in, I think that's something he'll work on.
Right. No, I mean, that's, and
can you hear me?
Yeah. I mean, it's not $100 trillion deal like we're talking about, but even some common sense ideas like maybe other countries should pay for their own defense rather than the U.S. paying for everything. And he was actually attacked over that idea. It's like, we should pay for German defense and defense. Why can't they spend some money? And oh my God, Trump is treating our allies horribly by asking them to, contribute to the defense of their own country. And Trump said, well, we're giving $100 billion to Iran so that they can make nuclear weapons to aim at us. And honestly, some of these things are so absurd. All Trump was doing was stating things that are absolute common sense, and he was still getting flack from the left. So, again.
Going back a minute to the education issue, let's talk a little bit more about that. Is your basic opinion that public education should be abolished at some point in the United States?
Yes. I mean, it, like a lot of these things, it can't happen overnight. I mean, somebody would have to come up with a plan for how to phase it out and privatize it and so on. But absolutely, the government has no business in education. And this mistake started out, unfortunately, with Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson once said, one of the quotes I love from him is that a people who wants to be ignorant and free wants what never was and never will be. And that's exactly right. You can't, a people who can't think, who can't defend their freedom because they have no knowledge, are going to remain free. And it's the same, I mean, Benjamin Franklin said it more concisely when, somebody asked him, well, what, after he signed the Constitution, well, what kind of government, do we have now? And he says, a republic if you can keep it. And we're not doing a very good job keeping it. Now, Jefferson, unfortunately, he knew that knowledge and the ability to think was necessary to defend freedom. But the inference that he made from that was, well, people need education, so the government needs to provide it because people simply don't have enough access to private schools now. And that was true in his day. Not very many kids got sent to private schools and educated well. And for some reason, Jefferson thought that he could trust that responsibility to the government. And that's the thing that somewhat surprises me. because Jefferson should have known better. And I think in many respects, he seemed to indicate that he did know better. But to trust government with the mind in power to indoctrinate those young minds, which they have done, that was a serious downfall of this country. So we need to get back into a position where government is not indoctrinating our children, where instead we can actually send them to schools that will educate them.
Yeah.
And
I think with Jefferson, what you're getting at is that he made a technical mistake that was pretty big, and in the context, it's understandable. He also lived in a world that was pre-Marxism, pre-communism, pre-Nazism,
right,
and pre-widespread propaganda. Like, propaganda was pioneered as we see it now in Nazi Germany, right? And then Soviet Union.
Right. Well, I mean, Soviet Russia. I mean, no, Jefferson did live in a different world. And I think people have to take his statements about education in that context.
Yep.
And I think his intentions were very good. And he made a mistake that was perfectly understandable in his context. So that's the way I would put it. Now, it was a mistake, and it was a serious mistake that we need to correct. And we have to get government out of education. I actually ran a small curriculum development company for a short time. And we developed some products about how to teach astronomy, physics. And I remember giving presentations to some schools, the teachers being very impressed with the way that we taught astronomy completely differently than the way it's taught today, and much better. But the teachers would tell me, well, no matter how much I like this, I can't teach it because the state tells me exactly what I have to teach every week.
Wow.
So literally, I would not be allowed to teach this, government mandate. People need to realize that. I mean, if somebody comes up with a great new innovative idea about how to teach something better than what we have now, it will not be allowed into the school.
Yep. What are your thoughts on the since COVID hit? So
can
to
you
speak.
Hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah. So my question is, since COVID hit, so to speak, this pandemic, there's been a push towards homeschooling, pretty big, especially among conservatives and Republicans and stuff. A lot of them are just concerned with public education, exactly like you're saying, especially now with CRT, the race theory crap. So what are your thoughts on homeschooling as a measure that people are taking right now? Is that a solution to what you're saying, or is it a temporary thing?
I'm very, and I hope that trend continues, pulling the kids out of public schools and homeschooling them if they can. Now, the only problem with that is that it's impractical for some families, that need two incomes, or and it can be very difficult. I mean, you can't expect parents to know that much about proper education. I mean, exactly what kind of literature program should you give your kid? How should you teach history? How should you teach science? Maybe you can get, some decent books out there. At least at the early grades, math is not one of the harder subjects to teach. But certainly science and history are the more difficult. So I think to do a good job on. And I think it's difficult for parents to do a great job homeschooling their kids. Now, I will say, it's probably still a good idea because you're going to do better than the public schools no matter what you do.
Yeah,
I mean, at least
good point.
You're not letting your child get brainwashed. So
yeah,
it's tough. It's tough. I sympathize with the parents. Do it anyway, if you can.
What you just said reminds me of what they say
public schools are.
Of what they say in medicine. First, do no harm. I think this is what doctors need to. Is what they are supposed to work by. And with education, it seems like that would be very similar. First, do no harm. Don't propagandize them. Don't expose your children to propaganda in schools.
Right.
At least the negative's gone. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And look, if you can keep your kid home and at least give your kid a bunch of good books to read, and even there's some great DVDs on science out there in the natural world and so on. Your kid has learned in animals just how crowds.
Your internet froze again. Can you see me? Oh, you're back. You're back.
Yeah, I'm back.
The next topic I wanted to move on to actually was Afghanistan. I've seen the Ayn Rand Institute, for example, and other objectivist organizations commenting on this, which is not unexpected. What are your thoughts philosophically on what happened in Afghanistan over the past few weeks?
All right, let me try to control my temper here.
Yeah.
I used to work for the Air Force, doing studies. A broader issue about war in general and what should be our policy in going to war. And, it comes down to the simple cliche, go big or go home. The Democrats they treat wars like college kids treat weekend parties. You just go every weekend. You go into war all the time. Here's the policy we should have. We go to war when we're attacked. When the individual rights of our citizens or our allies are seriously threatened by an enemy that is an imminent threat. And when that happens, we not so are we on?
Yeah, you're back. You froze up for about 20 seconds. Do I freeze for you when that happens, or is it just you freeze for me?
Yeah.
I heard
I'm
a good chunk of what you said.
Into what I'm saying, so
yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Anyway, the purpose of war is to annihilate the enemy. I mean, it has to be a real enemy that's threatening your country. But when you are justified in going to war, you go in all the way. And the purpose is annihilate them with as little loss of American life as possible. So after 9/11, we should have declared war explicitly on Afghanistan. That war should have taken maybe about a month. If it took more than 2 months, I mean, if I were president, if I were commander in chief, and I got together with my generals and they told me we're going to take more than 2 months, want an explanation, and I'd be very happy. So why should it take more than 2 months to defeat a Stone Age country? We're the United States of America. So you go in, you reduce Kabul and Kandahar to rubble, scorched earth, nothing left. Taliban gone, Al-Qaeda gone. All this happens within 2 months. And we're out of there.
Yeah.
The only reason for sticking around would be to use Afghanistan as a base of operations to go after other enemies in the Middle East. Iran, for example, the leading supporter of terrorism in the world and attacks against the West. So if somebody wants to argue, well, after you demolish Afghanistan, you really should turn to Iran and say, okay, your government has 2 weeks.
You froze there again for a couple seconds, but I heard the majority of it.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you hear the Iran part?
Yeah, the Iran part.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where.
So
it cut
anyway,
off
that's how I would have. That's how I would have dealt with it, and we would have been home from Afghanistan 20 years ago, so or 19 years ago. So all this nonsense going on right now is absolutely tragic betrayal of our military personnel by our spineless politicians. And what I really wish I could see right now is our military personnel home and all of our politicians over in Kabul. I mean,
I'm done.
That would be fun to watch.
Yep. Deport all of them, 99% of them.
Right. I mean, we're even letting them have Black Hawk helicopters. I mean, the Taliban is taking our military equipment.
All kinds of stuff. Humvees, fighter jets, a lot of stuff. There's small stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the first rule of warfare that everybody knows is even if you're retreating, you don't leave the enemy anything. And you sure as hell don't let Americans be killed by a bunch of Stone Age savages. So this is what our politicians do. Yeah. Anyway, that is an issue I get a little worked up over.
Yeah, I think the whole country is right now. It seems amazingly that even with the establishment politicians and the left, there's a lot of anger against Biden. There was calls to his resignation. They were really trending hard on Twitter yesterday, I think, the day before. Yeah. It continues. I don't know where that'll go. And Kamala's as bad or worse. So, yeah, it's just a giant shit show.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I think that misses the point. I mean, like I said earlier, I don't think Biden's in control anyway. So I'm not sure what...
Well, even Trump tried to wind down the war in Afghanistan, but the military, the generals and stuff, they lied to him, they manipulated him. they evaded that in every way imaginable for months or years or whatever it was, which is sick. I mean, that's a betrayal of the chain of command. And it could be treason in some ways, I would think.
Right. But even when Trump was talking about pulling out, I mean, like I say, I think we should have completely destroyed the Taliban before we pulled out. But if, I mean, Trump's plan was, okay, we're going to end this ridiculous war that's been going on way too long, and we're going to take our people home. I understand that. Yeah. But Trump at least laid down the criteria. He said, look, if you kill more Americans, if you attack our allies, if you do anything, take any, restart this fight against us, we are going to wipe you out. We know where you live. All these Taliban leaders, we know where you are. Okay.
Yep.
You will be reduced to rubble and corpses if you do this. And then Trump said, do you understand? And evidently the leader of the Taliban said, okay, I understand. But all that changed when, Biden took office and Trump was out. Then the Taliban felt like, So
I did want to kind of shift gears back to the beginning of the show. We talked a lot about your book. We talked about philosophy a little bit. We talked about induction. We talked about logic. How can the average person watching this show, it's mostly men, but a few girls too, how can they benefit from understanding epistemology? How can they benefit from understanding logic and reason and how to acquire knowledge? Like, what does this really mean on a day-to-day basis for them?
Well, I think it's, look, the better thinker that you are, the better position that you're in to defend yourself against all the lies that you're being told all the time. And a lot of those are coming from the government.
Yeah.
So if you want to live free, you want to pursue your own happiness, you want your children to have a good world to live in, you have to be able to fight all these falsehoods that we're being bombarded against all the time. So the only way to do that is to be able to think clearly. And that's it's not an easy job. I would say tune out the mainstream media completely.
Yeah.
That would be a good start. Listen to alternative media. Listen to, try to get your facts from sources that are more reliable.
Yeah.
The Epoch Times is, you know about them. They're,
I interviewed one of their reporters recently. He was in Tampa. I got to meet him. Roman, forget his last name. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a much better source of information. If you're going to read a newspaper, make it the New Post. Don't read any of the others. If listen to people like Candace Owens is very good. So be more selective about where you get your information. And that would certainly be one tip. One of the other tips I would have in a practical sense is put all the information you have the most reliable information together. Don't accept it piecemeal. Oh, I believe this piece and that piece. No, it has to fit together. It's like the pieces of a puzzle. It needs to fit together without contradiction. Otherwise, you're not arriving at a coherent viewpoint that could be true. And it's so when you hear from the government that, you need to wear masks all the time. Now, asymptomatic individuals, well, they don't really give COVID. Oh, but you need to wear a mask even if you're asymptomatic or even if you're young and in no danger. Do the vaccines work? Well, they don't really work against the new Delta variant. Well, but you still have to, have the vaccine, even though, Delta variant is the only thing going around now. I mean, if you listen to what they're saying, they contradict themselves every other. They contradict themselves every other minute. Okay.
Yep.
Pay attention to that. Put the facts together. Make sure they're all related and fit to a consistent whole. And try to get the most reliable fact. That's the only thing. People and try to protect your children, for God's sakes.
Yep.
Don't let your children be poked in the arm with an experimental medicine when you don't even know what the side effects are. When they're in no danger from this virus, be selfish. I mean, protect your own family. Don't just swallow all this government nonsense.
One thing that came to mind too, though, what inspired the question, I'm loving this. I mean, these are tips that people need to hear for navigating the insane clown world, we call it, of endlessly confusing propaganda. But I find use for epistemology beyond even government propaganda. Every industry has frauds, for example. And so I think in the private sector, individuals looking for advice, self-improvement advice, fitness, whatever the relationships, there's frauds everywhere. And a lot of them you use heavily. It's not propaganda per se, but it's logical fallacies, all kinds of just BS nonsense to manipulate and deceive the public. And the internet is a blessing and a curse here, because it's enabled people to create these fake personas, the same way politicians do. They manipulate the voters and they lie to them. Like Hillary's an excellent example, right? She has her public face and her private face, what she says in public and private. So I find that my view, if you have comments on it, is that basically epistemology is useful in every area of life, but in particular with just navigating business fraud and protecting yourself from liars and hucksters, charlatans, basically.
Right. Even look, I didn't mean to sound like I was restricting it to government. I think the government is a major threat right now, so that's why I went there first.
Yeah.
But I mean, epistemology, how to think, basically, is the better you are at it, the better life you're going to have. Period.
Yes.
Every area, from your personal life and your romantic relationships, your career, everything. We've all made mistakes. We've all, everybody can, I think, at their life and say, wow, that was kind of a bonehead move that cost me some unnecessary pain.
Yep.
And then, actually it's good to self-reflect about that stuff and say, well, why didn't I think a little better about that and arrive at the right conclusions a little sooner? I mean, that could have saved me that, terrible romantic relationship that I got involved with, or that could have saved me this bad detour I took in my career. So it's certainly not all about government. It's about every facet of your life. So we only have happy lives by means of the best thinking that we can do. And people who think better have better lives. It's as simple as there's all stories about, well, women who get in bad relationships repeatedly because they choose the same kinds of, bad guys. Well, what's going on there? And of course, the same goes for men. That's a big part of your life, who you choose to be with. And a lot of people out there are making some really bad choices by not thinking or thinking, not too well. So
thinking with the wrong head for men.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
But
so would you say that the quality, the quality of what comes to mind is that, if I can distill what you're saying, the quality of your life will be determined by the quality of your thinking. Is that about right?
Yeah, I would say that.
And epistemology is at
now
the root
the quality
of
our lives. Right. I mean, you in the larger context, you could actually say, in part, quality of our lives is been determined by the quality of past things. Because look at what we've inherited in the modern world. I mean, let's face it, people's lives used to be 18 hours a day.
You froze up again. Can you see me? You're back.
Are we back?
Yep.
Oh, okay. I mean, days people's lives, 100 years ago used to be terrible. So, I mean, the only reason our lives are so much better is because there's been great thinkers, generation after generation, that have, changed people's lives. But that's still, they can give you all the material assets and all the opportunities in the world. It's still your responsibility to do something with that and make your own life the best it can be. And people can hand you $1 million and you're still not going to be happy unless you earn it for yourself. And I would say the way you earn it is by your thinking ability, ultimately. Making the
clearly
right choices.
and deeply.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's been awesome having you on the show today. Episode 148 of the Redman Group. I appreciate your time today. It's been almost 2 hours. Any closing remarks? I do want to add that, again, everyone can get your book on Amazon, Logical Leap. There's a link in the description, actually, too, you guys. You can check that out. And your website is The Falling Apple. Let's see, thefallingapple.org. Fallingapple.org. There it is, actually.
Oh.
Got it pulled up.
Yeah, actually, I'm not. Well, I mean, they can order some of a great astronomy teaching device from there. It's the best in the world. I'm not really involved in that anymore. But they can. Tom Van Dam, a guy I've worked very closely with, he made this brilliant invention of the best device for teaching astronomy that exists in the world. And so, especially people that are homeschooling out there, private schools, they really should get that. So I'll definitely want to plug for that.
That's good to know.
And in terms of my book, you don't
Do you
have
have any
to be,
future books planned, actually?
perhaps. I mean, I would like to get out more material on science education, because I think I have that's been the last part of my career, and I would like to leave that legacy to people, for parents who really want their kids to learn how to think scientifically. And again, help these parents that are concerned that their kids are not getting what they need in public schools. So that would be my next project.
Okay. Yeah, I look forward to it. If we're not all in the gulag together.
Yeah, that's right. Re-education camp.
Yeah, probably not the education you had in mind with your book.
Yeah, no, not exactly. Okay,
I really appreciate your time.
All right, it's been great to be here with you, Anthony.
Yep. Thank you, David.
All right. Okay.
Everyone else, thanks
Bye.
for tuning in today for the Redman Group, and I'll see you next weekend, probably on Saturday. Adios.